Chile here with Sirius, Taurus, Moon, Jupiter, Day, Jupiter, our Jupiter in the 12th house with the Moon, bringing the 12th to the 9. And this is um, a big important teaching about weapon industry, weapon deals, and weapon strategy. So I'm broadcasting from Israel as we speak, and Prime Minister Meloni decided to suspend its defense agreements with Israel because one of the Italian um, UN, I think it was UN defense, was harmed by Israeli attack. Now, here is the thing: both NATO, United States, and Israel have deals with Palantir. Palantir is precision um, data gathering technology, and this means that Israel had the ability to identify to the bloodline who are the people that are going to be affected by each and every case. That's the power of companies like Nvidia, like Palantir, and that's also a part of the reason Peter Thiel sued the actual companies that he sold to, which was intelligence and governmental, for basically misusing the program. And when we think about this in terms of weapon deals, had Israel not have these surveillance technologies, had Israel not known who are they shooting, it can be that the decision of, in that case, Prime Minister Meloni would have been different. It is also the case, to the full fairness and honesty, if one, and I'm going to put my Model UN hat on. If I had to be Italy, and I think about the fact that I, as a representative, know that, of course, people can be harmed from the UN in at war, like stuff like that. Of course, that happens. If I don't know for sure that those were Italian people that were harmed there, or that those people were specifically meant to be there, I would look at the UN. I would look at my own country's military. I would look at my own country's intelligence way before I would get into a decisive position with the other country. But that's something that's impossible to do when we have such technologies both in NATO, which in that case Italy is a member of, in Israel, and in US. It's impossible not to know who that person was, and therefore it's immediately impossible not to know if they were supposed to be there or not supposed to be there, or what happened. Now you say, Shirley, what about kidnapped? Of course. um, so this brings a dual question. On the one hand, if we don't have these technologies, then probably we wouldn't have such a quick suspension following this event. If we do have the technologies, we can immediately hold Israel accountable. As long as the technologies are not misused. If the technologies are misused, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp must stand their toes down on time, lest there be participants in profiting off of crimes against humanity. Not even talking about war crimes. So the common Mary and Jane that invest in weapon industries should probably take a note. I know I'm taking a note. The common people that think to develop weapon industries should also take a note. These preliminaries also bring us new conflicts. While Iran is being tended to, as per the West, two other countries that are not being tended to, as per Israeli news, are Pakistan and Turkey. According to some of my colleagues, it's not going to be a simple take, which means when we speak about Turkey, of course, it's not possible to do what was done with Iran. When we're talking about Pakistan, we're already running into China. And another thing that happened was Slovenia considering to opt out of NATO, and again, not necessarily support the ally of the United States in attacking Iran. A lot of countries are looking at Iran and trying to make calculated steps. And this is another teaching, because if we take Israel, that doesn't have the map, and here's something that here's a saying that comes from Pakistan, and that saying was wishing the people that created the cancerous country called Israel, in order to get rid of the Jews of Europe, to go to hell or whatnot. It's a very obvious statement for people for people in Israel, and it's, by the way, an incredibly aggressive but also incredibly diplomatic statement from Pakistan, because it does not target the people of Israel, nor the Jews. Now, such a thing can happen to almost any country on the globe. All English shipped up. I can't believe it. Hello. Okay, I last saw one when I was in Netherlands on the train. I grew up with two old English sheepdogs. Anyway, when I think about what can be studied from the Israeli case, the very thing that sustains any country in such conditions is that the people, each and every individual in the country, is safe and free. Doesn't work with Epstein ring, doesn't work with human trafficking, doesn't work with all the And to be fair and square, that diplomacy was unfortunately excellent to deal with monarchies and world leaders. If you can get the people that can get away with by something that other people are not supposed to get away with, then and then what happens when you have a conflict between the two? Then more and more layers of society have to get away with. Now, when that's tax evasion, it's less of an issue. Why am I saying that? Because taxation and resources have nothing to do with one another. In fact, if one could not deprive a person from housing and land, no matter how much debt they have accumulated, Rothschilds would never have to evacuate any mansion in France. This is what happened after the subprime. But when it comes to marginalizing societies, basically rape, then we begin to have a Me Too. Think about it, the Me Too was after the subprime. It was after the first chapter in the Epsteins. And here is the flip side of the coin of if those people at the top can get away with that, so should the people that at the lower ranks or the common people. The flip coin is, hey, if they're going to use extortion to get rid of so and so and so and so on the charges of child trafficking, sex offenses, and so on and so forth, so mote it be per every individual. And this is why people have said that Me Too went too far. Now, think about the Israeli case. Israel now needs to rely on its citizens. Israel was founded upon a clause, a very particular clause in the Declaration of Independence that said freedom, the safety, the dignity of people, and their liberty, the freedom of vocation. Rape is not vocation. The human rights and dignity, irrespective of their religion, sex, gender. Religion, sex, gender, and origin. Now, the Israeli civilians are cashing in on that statement. That can happen to any country. Even if it didn't have that clause, that clause is almost like a natural law for individuals in any country or kingdom. So This is putting Israel in an excruciatingly difficult situation. Now here is the way out of this excruciatingly difficult situation. If Israel does account for and provide what is stated in that clause, meaning housing without being raped or raping, income that supports one's dignity and health, not being enslaved or enslaving, not being raped or raping, food sovereignty, then it begins to tend to something that is going to give it a strategic advantage over any country in the world. Thailand. Oh, Israel has, imagine a situation, Israel has held accountable the people that went to pay for raping girls in Thailand. Now Thailand holds a human trafficking, child trafficking business. And Israel knows because it had to tend to the civilians in it that were committing crimes against humanity there, that the Thai government earned from. Now those children are going to need housing without being raped, without raping, and are not able to work. They're children. Thailand has the money. And that's just one example. So, continuing on Rahu Ketu, ingressing to Magha Nakshatra. This is just one of the topics that come up. And also when we talk about war strategy, a person that defends from rape or abolishes rape always have more, how should I say that? When does PTSD happen? And from veterans I know that when they felt like they were doing something wrong, then PTSD happened. It's something that shouldn't have happened. Or that something wrong, of course, was done to them. A lot of Israeli soldiers come back from the war and they have PTSD and they say to their therapists, and in such a time, it's not only the certified therapist, everybody that has anything to do with and has worked with trauma patients, then people hear about the occultistic things. A therapist would see snakes coming out of the head of the patient after the nova. They hear people that say, well, I also raped them, I like Hamas. Now, these people were growing up with ritual abuse, a lot of them. Watch Anya Wick, Ritual Abuse to Dissociation. And then a lot of them would have probably kind of like a double life. Whereas an area where they can be bad and they are supposed to be evil, and then where they have to show that they are the most benevolent. And such upbringing, definitely, it was supposed to desensitize, and it was supposed to prevent people from disobeying any illegal orders. This is also why Israel is turning to ritual abuse now in an unprecedented way. Not only Israel. What we can learn from that is that when a country establishes its intelligence on the basis of ritual abuse practices, which is rape and torture, mind control, and so on and so forth, it risks sovereignty. In a world where all the players are like that, then it's as sensitive as any other country. But in a world such as the crisis, where every country seeks to put it on other countries, then having the strategic advantage of not growing by ritual abuse is unprecedented. Israel doesn't have that. Finland came a little bit closer because of the way they treated psychiatric patients. And of course, they had to deal with the KGB. After the Nazis, they had to get, and one way to get prepared, by the way, open dialogue that they used is taken from Netherlands. The minute they acknowledged the rape of the patient that were seen as psychotic and did not marginalize them anymore, then people began to heal without all the antipsychotics and so on and so forth. How to do that in Israel? Well, first of all, is listening to people. But then it's also basically the defense of their testimony. And basically shifting the training, shifting those upbringings. As a woman, I don't hold it for Charles Montesquieu that he did not even think about women having the right to vote when he thought about the division that was the foundation of democracy in terms of structure. The juristic system, the government system, and the legislative system being the parliament. Because Charles Montesquieu lived 12 years ago. I could have been alive 4 times before. So, in a century from now, nobody would hold it to any country that it used to have child trafficking. that it didn't know of the damages that it causes, that it thought that this mind control based. But for that to happen, we really have to change these things now.